Hi everyone, once again we are doing the traditional 5 minutes of waiting just to make sure that everyone's signed up and joined in, and then we'll start. Okie dokie, it looks like we have got everyone joining us at the moment. Thank you so much guys for taking time out of your busy days and busy schedules, I'm sure, to go and listen to me prattle on about iVend. So with that in mind, let's continue on. Once again, the rules are: if you've got a question, please go and put it into the question box. I will answer it as soon as possible. Please, all questions are welcome from beginning to end. Only questions I do not like are the ones that don't get asked, because if they're not asked, then, well, I can't answer them, and that's a bit of an issue. So now that I've said that, if there are any questions from yesterday or the day before, please let me know now, and I will try to answer them quickly before we go and we dive on into back into the iVend Management Console and the retail configuration side of things. First off, I am going to go and show my screen, and I would ask you to please put up your hand if you can see my screen. That way, at least I can go and see what is, there we go. Thank you, Philip. Okay. So if Philip can see it, Kirsty, Carla, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, other people can see my screen. That is always good news. Remember, I'm just going to put your hands down for the moment. There we go. It's amazing what you can do with the software. Right. So with that, there we go. Thank you, Philip, indeed. Okay, so let's carry on, and we can work through iVend. Just one quick question: does everyone remember how you access the help in iVend? Please put the answer into the question box while we move on and have a quick look at Retail Profile. Okay, let's have a look. Control F1. Control F1. Perfect. Okay. Yes, Control F1. Do not forget Control F1, because if you forget Control F1, I will remind you about Control F1 if you call and ask me for help. Probably the same thing is going to happen if you ask anybody else. So, right, Control F1, it's your first best line of help, and it's probably exactly what you need. If, of course, you go and you do use Control F1 and you still don't understand what's going on, then I will be more than happy to help, really. It is not a problem. But if you're asking me about stuff that is already in the help, that is plainly in the help, then yeah, you might be in a bit of trouble for me. Okay, so guys, the point that we're at today, not tomorrow, not quite there yet. The point we're at today is on the retail configuration side of things. Now, this is one of the longest sections that we'll go through. There are some pretty long sections in operations. I'm hoping we get through to operations today. That's great. But for us today, retail configuration is the area that we are looking at. The first thing that we look at here is the retail profile. Now, the retail profile is one of the most important areas of iVend. And I'm sure whatever systems you're using out there, if you have any experience with these ERP systems or whatever else they might be, there is always a place, a menu, a hidden spot where all of your important settings are held. I know that this is true of SAP, I know it's true of Sage, and I know it's certainly true of Microsoft. There's a spot where you have to go and set half a dozen things that actually control all the things you want to do in the system. For us, Retail Profile is that place, and fortunately for us, there is actually a number of places you're going to start seeing it pop up again and again and again. Now, now some of you might go and remember from earlier, earlier in these sessions, yesterday to be precise, we already saw the retail profile pop up over here in enterprise settings. And yes, you quite literally can't create the system without selecting a default retail profile. There will always be a default retail profile. That's obviously needed. So once you select that, you can carry on with obviously your setup. But now we actually get to the point where you may need to create additional retail profiles. And the entire idea for creating additional retail profiles is that, say, once again, if I head across to my favorite slide, okay, different stores might have different retail profiles. specifically if they are in different franchises, then those might be different, as well as different people working at different points of sales might have different retail profiles. There is a lot of, you will need to know, please note that there is a lot of, there are a lot of differences between how old, but there are a lot of differences of how you can go set this up. But the retail profile is one of the things that makes us really, really flexible and also allows us to go change things and set things up as necessary. So let's go through the default retail profile and you'll start to see why we can go set this for different people. So code, description, subsidiary, those are the first ones there. Next one up, department. This is more just to go say which department, which retail profile belongs to. It's not a real setting that we go and we set a lot, that we do a lot of stuff in. In fact, if we actually look at the department setup here, come on, there we go, department. You'll actually see I don't have any, but even if we go to new, you'll see you only have like 3 lines to it. It's more for reporting than for anything else. So in default transaction mode. So what this is your default transaction mode when you open iVend Retail. So when I open it, it automatically kicks me into sale. That's because on my retail profile, my user has been set to use the sale setup there. After that, it can be set to just about anything else, including quotation, sales refund, layaway, anything, or special order. The reason for this is in some stores, I'm sure you've seen, they actually have a refund area or a refund point where you will go, or customer service point or something like that, where you actually go up to them and say, hi, I want to get a refund for X, Y, and Z. And they say, sure, no problem. And they will go and help you with your refund. Because of that, your refund is actually set, their tills for iVend would be set as refund. Over there, sales refund. So that's something else to go and look up, and that's something else that's something else that you can do over here. So in your refund department, it automatically does refunds. Pretty cool. Next thing up, auto pause timeout, idle pause timeout, auto lock management console timeout. These are all to go say, essentially, your pause will automatically lock after so many seconds. Your pause will lock, your idle pause timeout will lock after so many seconds, as well as your management console will time out and lock after so many seconds. Now this is to go stop people going, oh, well, I just need to go off and do this, and then they leave. And naturally, they go and they leave their machine unlocked, and all of a sudden it's like, let me just see what this is over here. Or, hey, let me just give myself a quick refund. So you can force it to automatically lock after a certain time period. After that, you can also auto-close complete sales view. So if the sales view is complete, so for instance, over here when I do a sale, I'll just do this as a cash sale. There we go. It's this view over here. So does this automatically close? You can have this. You see at the moment I actually need to click the complete button. I can actually have a timer here that will count down and then it will close automatically. Meaning it will take me straight back to the screen and I can carry on selling because that's what you got to do. Login per transaction. Typically I see this, well typically you see this more with hospitality as well as also if you've got multiple people using one point of sale, which can and does happen specifically in your, let me see, specifically in places like your high-end stores, your jewelry stores, your electronic stores. They will have multiple people on the floor of the actual, they will have like 5 or 6 people on the actual floor of the store itself. They go and they wander around, help people, and when it comes time to sell something, they come along, they go to the point of sale, they log in, do the sale, and then once the sale happens, it automatically logs them out, and they go off and they wander around the store and go and help people go and buy things. So that's the nature of their business. So you can set that here as well. Use zip validation. If you're in the US, you will do this. If you're not in the US, you don't really care. So yes, you can, or otherwise you don't have to. Afterwards, show transaction grid headers. What that's actually asking for is the headers up here. You see type, product code, description, discount, quantity, price. There are more that you can slot in. There are more you can take out. Those are the ones that are available over there. Now that's part of the POS customization. Well, putting more columns in and taking them out, that's part of post customization. Once again, I'm not really going to do that this time around because we don't have time. So the entire idea today is to go and get through as much of this as we can and hopefully get you guys all set up and running. Next up is price override upper limit, lower and upper limit. So how far can you change the price? The entire idea is that with this, you can actually go and override your price to a certain level. And you can also go limit it and say, well, no, you can't. You can only do a 10% price change, for instance. Keyboard mode, US QWERTY keyboard or US block, or, well, you can use the standard QWERTY keyboard or the AZERTY keyboard if you are French. Yes, AZERTY is actually a keyboard. Yes, it does. Yes, it is from France. I do happen to know that because experience. And then also you get the US block keyboard. Now the US block keyboard over here is essentially your programmable keyboard. You used to see it a lot on the point of sales, but now thanks to the miracle technology of touchscreen that we use, you don't really see it anymore. Next up, display keyboard for authorization, yes or no? It's a difficult choice, but I'm sure you guys are capable of making it. All right, after that, transaction mode alignment, left or right. What this is asking is where exactly do you want the screen to be set up? Do you want it to be set up this way around with the payments on this side and the and these buttons over here, or do you want it flipped? It's not, considering the actual designer that we have today, normally most people just ignore this, because this used to be used a lot for places that use left, well, we go and we read left to right in English. For Arabic, you read right to left. And that means, that also means that it is, that for them, it's, they go and they tend to read things the other way around, so they like to have things flipped. So out here, for me at least, and for most places I know, we don't really use that. But it is available. And we are fully translated to Arabic. Actually, yeah, we have got rather a large number of reference sites there too. Open item edit view automatically. So that means that if I select the item, there we go. For instance, it selects that, it will automatically open up this view. Otherwise, it just doesn't open up the view. So. Enumero for scan. Some places they want you to go and have a different line for every item you scan. So instead of me going and scanning in another item and it just goes and it increases the quantity, in that case it would do another line, another line, another line, another line. Some places do want that. Primarily I tend to find that's mainly for tax purposes. Or if there's going to be customization on, if for instance there's going to be tailoring on each item, then you do that in that case. Open item edit view on column click. So yeah, that I click over there, it opens the item edit view. Yay. Refund without receipt and exchange without receipt. Okay. I obviously have these ticked because, well, I'm running a demo system. Most places today that I see will say no receipt, no refund, because it's an old trick to go and it's an old trick. You go and you buy something from somewhere else, and then you try to get a refund from. So, for instance, what people would do is they would go buy something on special, then it would break. And instead of going back to the place they bought it on, they bought it at where it was on special, and they're only going to get, say, $10 for, they'd rather go back to another store that never had it on special and try get, say, $20 or $30 back for it. That's why most places today will say maintain your, keep your receipt for refund, or maintain your receipt for refund is the wording that they want to use. Just a quick word about refunds and exchanges. A refund is, refunds are typically what you would use. A refund means basically you can actually go and have an item come in right there, and you can go refund, and you can refund whatever item is out there. Okay, just like that. It comes out as a refund. You're essentially giving the money back. But the exchange is slightly different. What an exchange would do is it essentially takes in the old item and it gives you a new item of the exact same type. So for instance, it's men's solid polo. With that, I would go get with the men's solid polo, I would go and get this exact one. If I was to exchange it, I would give back that exact same one that I have, and then I would get back a different. Well, I'd get back another men's solid polo. I wouldn't get something different. This is a bit of a thing if you're doing different sizes. So let's say, for instance, I bought a T-shirt and it's the wrong size. For that, you would do a refund and then a sale, kind of like a refunded. Let me actually just avoid this here, and I can show you exactly what it is. So, for instance, if I was to do a refund, if I was to do a sale and then a refund, okay, that would effectively be an exchange. Whereas if I was to do let's avoid this and then we try again. If I was to do then a refund of a different item, that is how we normally do, I'm exchange. That's another item exchange that you can do. Just be aware of that. Please be aware as well that because every single size and color is set up as individual items in the system, that does mean that if I want to go, say, exchange a jacket, so let's go, I actually have an example of this here, so let's go over here, let's say, let's do the refund step first. And in case you're wondering, we do actually have a document that specifies all these different items that I am using. Let's say that I had there you go, Apex Bionic Jacket Black Medium. Okay. If I'm going to do an exchange, I will take, let's say that for whatever reason, the zipper came off, or a pocket tore off, or something like that, and it's clearly a manufacturing defect. If it's an exchange, then I take this one in and I get back one of these, a medium black Apex Bionic Jacket. If I go and I buy it, and let's say my girlfriend buys it, or my mom or my kids or whatever it might be, they buy it for me and they've got the wrong size, because sizing in clothing is notoriously bad. Really, it is really horrible. If you've ever worked in clothing, you know that sizing is just like horrible, horrible, horrible. But let's say I bought this one, somebody bought this one for me, and then I go and I take it back. So instead I go to, so I say, no, I need a different size. What I would have to do then is I need a refund on this one, and then I would do a sale for, say, that one. So I'm refunding this one and I'm selling this one. That's a size change. Because it's two different products, it needs to be taken into account like this, as opposed to just an exchange, which is I'm getting one item in and I'm sending out this. An exchange is I'm moving the same item. All right, so now we've covered that. Order update, change amount and payments. So as I go through, let's add one more item to here. And I go to my payments. Let's say I do a part payment of $50 here. You see it's going to go tell me my paid amount. It's also going to tell me the balance due. So does that automatically update or not? I can't see why you turn that off, but then again, once again, international systems, so we do end up with weirdies. Okay. Which currency you are giving change in? Obviously, if you're in like international or whatever it is, you might receive, if you're getting foreign currency in, then typically you'd go and give change in your base currency. Donation product, so that's for rounding. If there is any rounding going on with your currency, you can actually do a donation product. The donation product itself will then go, it's essentially a non-stock item that then gets bought in such a way that essentially gets sold to go and donate to a specific, that gets sold in such a way to go and donate through to a specific charity or whatever it is. At the end of the day, the sales of that product are effectively what would go for the donation. It's effectively, where it would be used is that if you went and had a rounding on there, so for instance out here we don't really use 1, 2 and 5 cents, or in fact anything below the 10-cent mark. So anything there would effectively be any of that rounding variable that would happen there, that would then get put into the donation product, which would then be used for donations. Obviously that's the correct idea. Refund for promotional items. So if an item is on promotion, do you get a refund for it or not? Yeah, that is something else, because sometimes a promotional item is a used item and it's or what they call a shop soiled item. And that might mean that things like the warranty is void for various reasons. And it's being sold for a cheaper amount, which also means that people need to just be aware about that, because otherwise, people can buy the item and then come back and say, hey, this thing's broken. I didn't buy it on, even though I bought it on promotion and people told me that it's most likely just about to go fall apart. Now I bought it back and I want a new one, brand new one. So once again, people do this. This is retail. Print suspended transactions, yeah, you can do that. Most people don't, because I've been through the suspended transaction setup or the case study for, or the use study for it, or the use case for it with you before. The reason most people don't do this is if you print a suspended transaction, what can sometimes happen is if there's a bit of collusion, people can go and take the suspended transaction and then give it and then say, oh no, look here, you see, I bought this. And if you go and you do a bit of creative folding, you can actually hide the line that says suspended, which means that people won't actually realize it's been suspended, and then you just walk out the door for it. Once again, used in fraud, so be careful about that. Deleting suspended transactions at the end of the day, yeah, your store's closed. There's no reason to hang on to a suspended transaction for longer than you need to. You can do that. You might not want it either. Auto add cashier salesperson. So now we get to some lines with the salesperson over here. It really depends on how your salespeople are working. Look, there is a mandatory salesperson per line item, but if you've got auto add cashier, then it will automatically add the cashier in. Now, there is some things to be said about this, specifically because if you've got salespeople want comm. That's it. They want their commission. If your salesperson is not actively making sure that the comm is put in, you can actually have a warning to go say, oh no, your commission is not, oh no salesperson registered for the sale, please add a salesperson, which is the warn if line. There you go. Warn if line item is no salesperson, mandatory salesperson. If you haven't automatically add the cashier as the salesperson, then the salesperson and the cashier are two different people. You then need to have the salesperson come to the cashier and say, this is my sale, make sure it's mine. Because otherwise, obviously, you end up in a comm war, and that's just bad for shop morale. I show negative inventory resolution. So if I have negative inventory, it will go if I have a problem with inventory. So say, for instance, somebody tries to buy an item and it says, you actually have got no stock of this at the moment. You can then do a sales order, stock transfer, see what's available in other stores. All the rest of that good stuff is there. Do you want to show that or not? That might be only available to, say, your managers. It might not be available to, say, your to individual cashiers for various reasons. Quick Complete, I don't recommend using this. I've shown you the Quick Complete button over here. Hang on, I'll just finish this. What was it? 74.38. There we go, complete. We do actually have the Cache Quick Complete button over here. typically this button, if I have the exact amount of change, so let's sell the one item. If I've got that exact amount and change on me, then I can go cash quick complete. Typically this is used for like dollar stores or pound stores. I see that a lot in Europe and the UK, where everything is quite literally $1. Everything in the store is a pound. That does mean, however, that people generally have the exact amount on them because it's a nice round number. And when it gets down to things like the 74.88, most people do not have 88 cents on them. It's rare. Hence the reason that I say just be careful about using this, because it will go and it automatically does that. It does not give you a chance to do change. You can also go and do confirmation required, which basically just means that if I press the button, it says, do you want, warning, do you want to do this? Complete tendering on zero balance. You may well have a zero balance transaction if you're doing refunds or serious discounting. That may well be the case. Otherwise, you can stop people doing that. And you can see over here why I say this is a collection of all those settings that you never knew you needed, but it's the one place that has it, because it does have things like it in here, and you can also set this up per customer or per employee. You cannot set it up per customer, just to be clear. You can set it up per employee. Restrict search to other POS transactions, because once again, salespeople are more than likely to try and sabotage each other, particularly if they get gossipy and they see, oh, somebody's doing really well, let's sabotage them. Yeah. Use last selected event for next transaction. What this means is that if I do a sale, then my next transaction will be a sale. If I do a refund, then my next transaction will be a refund until I change it back to sale. This is okay. I normally don't recommend that you check this. It's fine. It's okay if you have a one store, one POS kind of situation where one person is running it and that they're relatively sharp. Otherwise, I can guarantee you, you're going to have somebody going through the entire day doing refunds of all their sales because they did one refund in the morning. So avoid if necessary. So I don't recommend checking that unless it's really necessary. Open product search if barcode not recognized. So if I go and I scan something in, it says, well, I don't recognize what that is, instead of giving you an error. Combine multiple transaction refund. Yeah, so if you want to do multiple refunds on multiple different, if you want to do multiple refunds for multiple different transactions into one single, then you can do that all together in one single transaction. You can do that there. There you go. Use current date in the search. Application theme. We do have some themes built into iVend that you can use and change. I do recommend, however, just use the iVend Metro skin. It's the easiest. Everything works with it. If you really want to, you can go change to something like this, if it's Halloween, and you'll see like the little checkboxes become pumpkins and things like that. And if it is Christmas, well, you can do Christmas too. There you go. And all the checkboxes become little presents. And it's very Christmassy. But yeah, what I would recommend, rather just leave it as iVend Metro. Nobody needs the skins to change around while you are busy doing stuff. Allow login. This over here is used if you are doing, say, a 24-hour store and you don't do a day end at, say, midnight. That's the biggest problem I see, is that a lot of places they go and they only do their a lot of these 24-hour stores or places that are open over midnight. Okay, because obviously if it's over midnight, it changes to a new day. And we also see this a lot in places like UAE or Muslim countries where it's Ramadan and everything's open over the night, over the course of the night. Yeah, that also means that your everything's shut during the day, but everything's open over the course of the night, which also means that you're allowed to log in if your business, which means that you're going to need to do your day end at like 4 o'clock in the morning, once everything's actually starting to shut down again. And if you wanted to do a day end at, say, 12 o'clock at midnight, the system's basically got to, that's the last time you want to do your day end, because that's the time when everyone's buying stuff. So just be aware of that. Allow sales without serial or batch selection, yes or no. Well, if you want to do without serial or batch selection, otherwise it has to do a serial or batch selection over there. Allow recalling multiple suspended transactions. Yeah, once again, my opinion of suspended transactions is, yeah, you know, if you want to do it, it can be very handy, but you need to have somebody, with the person working it needs to be relatively, well, they can work it. You can do multiple suspended transactions. I don't really know why you'd want to do multiple ones altogether, because that to me sounds like somebody messed up. So might be something to look at. Apply a coupon on the lowest priced item, log voided transactions. Oh yes, you do want to do that, because trust me, that's the first thing everybody. If any of the cashiers are even slightly criminally minded, that's one of the first things that they checked, is that, you know, does the voided transaction, what happens when I void a transaction? What happens if I void many transactions? That's the first thing that they always try. Number of lines in a transaction. I know it might seem odd that you might limit the number of lines in a transaction, and really the 100, effectively this is 100,000, because we start counting at 0. I see I have a hand up. Okay, please type your question and I will go and answer it. The reason for this is that in some places with your, I'm going to answer the question in a second. In some places you go and you see your express lanes, they've got, say, your 10 item limit, and in some places they do actually limit it to a 10 item limit, which is a bit annoying, but yeah, you can actually do that, yeah. As well as there's also some places tax, once again, plays a function. Philip has got a question. What log voided transaction, what can sales reps potentially do wrong? Typically, okay, so Philip, typically what happens with the log voided transaction is I've seen, traditionally in the past, a lot of the some of the other systems, when they log a voided transaction, it would go and okay, well, let me give you an example about what happened with one of the other systems we ended up replacing. They would go. What would happen with this previous system is, as people went and scanned an item, as you scanned an item, it would go and automatically print out the item onto the printer. Granted, this was a slightly old system. Most systems these days don't do this for this very specific reason. So what would happen is I scan an item over here. So as I scan the item, it then picks it up and it would go write it onto my receipt over here. So the first thing it would do is print out all of this, and then it would go scan an item onto put an item onto my receipt. And it would do that automatically. Then what the people found out is that if I went and I voided this item, it wouldn't print out on the receipt item voided. So what would happen is a couple of the tellers got together, a couple of cashiers got together, and they decided they were going to be smart about this. So they would have friends come along. The cashier would scan the item so it would print on the receipt. Then they'd void the item, so it would remove it from the sale in the system, but not from the actual receipt itself. Now, when the guys eventually figured this out, is they kept on, their stock counts obviously went drastically out, but then also they started to see, oh no, hang on, wait a minute, we're seeing some people going and buy huge amounts of stuff, but the amount of stuff that they're buying doesn't match with the amount of trolleys. Granted, these people were buying in bulk. Eventually, what happened was one of the security guards twigged to this, and he went and he said, hang on, wait a minute. You've got something like 6 or 7 trolleys here worth of stuff. This is like, but your receipt says you're only buying like 1,000 rands worth of stuff. Hang on, wait, something's wrong here. And he went off to go, the security guard went off to go get one of the managers, and at which point the guys with the trolleys they rammed the door and they just gapped it down the street, and they got away. But then they actually realized, hang on, wait a minute, there's something wrong over here, and they picked it up, and they actually they managed to get two of the cashiers. They fired them, but that's a problem. That's a problem with the void thing over here. So it's one of the things you need to be aware of. Also, typically that's and trust me, the cashiers know this. And the cashiers, like I said yesterday, as one of the guys with the store told me, stock is either walking out the back, which means it's being stolen by the staff, or it's walking out the front, which means it's being stolen by the customers. And if you've got a particularly clever thief, and you do get long-term particularly clever thieves who don't really get caught because they never really steal enough, that's one of the first things they try is the void, is how does the void work. So just be aware of that. We do log that. There are reports on that as well. It's very, very important to keep an eye on that. Maximum lines. Enable printing for transaction preview. Yeah, once again, that falls into the same problem of the story that I just told you, so be careful of that. Display image in search. Display image height in search. 0 just means it will automatically display. So if I do a item search, yeah, at the moment my images aren't displaying over there, but that's probably because I've broken something rather than the system. So you can do that there. Allow tax-free. Can you do tax-free sales? Because remember, a tax-free sale is different than a tax-exempt sale, and it is also different than a zero-rated tax sale, because a tax-free sale means that you can effectively take the tax off the sale. So yes, and trust me, if you guys ever go and implement a place in one of these duty-free places, yeah, it's the selling procedures are quite different. So particularly around tax. POS layout. So at the moment, I'm using the apparel layout. This one, as I think I've shown you, we can customize the layout to look exactly how you want it. This is how, and it's at this point that you go and you actually set a layout to an actual either a machine or to a user. Import file delimiters, commas, that's fine. Show items available, only available. So if you've already sold out of a promotion, you won't be able to see the item. Okay, just won't bring up the promotion, which can or can't work. It's yeah, something just to be aware of. Check for cash drawer status, check for printer status. Yeah, you can do those as well. Number of records to display on default search is 1,000. That goes and stops it. That goes and stops it taking forever to go bring up a record search. Barcode scanning on the POS. So which things can you scan as a barcode? I think that covers most of it. Your different button panels. We don't if you're using one of these custom designs like I am, this button panel will not really be something you use. There are other ones if necessary, you can go in online and you can see how they were used, but traditionally at the moment we're not using them. That is it's a legacy feature. Manager override required. I believe I had a question about this the other day, and these are the things that you can go put your manager override required on. So cost protection override, credit limit overrides, reprint transactions. I'm not going to read through all of these. You can read through these yourselves, but it does cover most of the things that you would want to do at the POS. So really, if you try to do something like say a void, you can go have it on the void transaction. There you go, void sale or void item. If you have it on there, a sale item edit, item information edit, those kind of things, those are all set there. Next one up, poll display message details. Yes, I showed you what a poll display is. You can go and have a message over there saying, thank you for shopping with us and welcome to shopping with whoever it is. So I actually have my simulated poll display. It's hiding somewhere over here. There it is. So there's my poll display. If I avoid the current transaction, I believe it should. There you go. It said thank you for shopping with iVend Retail. But you can use this one over here to just see how it should display and maybe why it's not displaying that way on the actual poll display. because trust me, when you're working with some of these peripherals, it's a pain. So it's a pain in the posterior. Discount details. This works in conjunction with your price override, because this is overriding the price. This over here is about your discounts. So that's also to be just aware of that. You might want to just limit how much they can do. Reason code details required. So for instance, if I do a transaction, does it require me to have a reason code? Same thing over here for comment details. Does it require me to have a comment? I think you saw me using the comments the other day when I did one of the when I did an approval. Does it actually require me to have it? Or because it, by the way, just because it requires me to have a comment does not stop people just typing gobbledygook in there. I'm sorry, there's a limit to what we can actually do, specifically because we're not doing spell checking, because sometimes people just use this short phrase text language. So yeah, that's there, as well as also worldwide people. Yeah, we're not doing it for every language. Sorry, no. But you can set it here. And to be perfectly honest, if somebody is doing that for their comment, then that person needs to be disciplined. It should be company policy that you have to type in clear details what you're doing over there. Right there. That's not something that I would really actually want to enforce through iVend. POS wildcards. Oh, these are actually quite interesting. This used to be part of that. Remember I said about the block keyboard, the programmable keyboard? With that, you could actually program that if you pressed a button, it would actually do things in conjunction. So for instance, if I go at, well, let me just bring up an item, or, okay, in that programmable keyboard, I could go like at 4, press that, and you'll see it instantly change the quantity to 4. All right, so that's what you could really do with that. It works. It worked very well for a long time. But it's not really in use today. Emailing, where you're emailing your receipts from. Customer display settings. This is if you're going to have a separate customer display. Really, it's up to you. If you are going to do that, then you can go say exactly what's being displayed. People can look at it and marvel as they spend their money. Product display settings. So this over here. This came into play, sharp out of you might have seen this earlier, that if I just do a normal item search, okay, it brings it up in this color over here. However, if I do an item search for, let's go over here, for my matrix items, it brings them up in a slightly different color, just to go show that they're all linked together, and you can set that here. All right. And then also, do you want to do transaction signature capture? So we integrate through to transaction signature pads. Those pads then work with this. And over here you can say, oh yes, you've captured the signature for it. And I believe you can actually have it printed out in certain places, but that's up to you if you want to use it. Some places have used it, but people are very hard on point-of-sale software. They're hard on point-of-sale software. They're even harder on point-of-sale hardware. Seriously, I've seen some people, I honestly thought that they would put their finger through the touchscreen. They were banging it so hard. You wouldn't have thought that you could go smack the screen any harder. So people are very hard on their touchscreens. People are very hard on all of the point-of-sale stuff, basically because it's not theirs, it belongs to the company. And if people don't own it, then typically they don't take care of it. So it's something just to be aware of. And by the way, there are studies that prove that. Next up is subsidiaries. Now for subsidiaries, I have enabled this at the moment. Obviously in a lot of places you would not enable this, but the entire idea with the subsidiary is that it essentially goes and splits up it allows you to do separate reporting and to go set up your database in such a way that different subsidiaries report to different areas of the actual system. Now, the different subsidiaries over here, in this case I've got my local currency, my address, my culture info, and even my time zone. So I can have different time zones with different subsidiaries, which is kind of nice, specifically if I am operating in multiple time zones. But yeah, I can also go say whether it's tax inclusive or not. Once you do split up your subsidiary, there are things that you can go and there are things that you can stop, and there are things that you do need to do. One of them is each subsidiary would have its own different tax code. It might be tax inclusive or not, but it would have its own different tax code. as well as you can also choose whether you want to assign all employees, vendors, customers, and products to each subsidiary. Up to you. But once that's done, and you're going to see the subsidiary pop up in a lot of places as I work through the system, if you haven't seen it pop up in a lot of places already as I've been working through the system. So next up is, now we're going to move on to actual setup of the store and how that's done. So with that, the first place I actually come to is warehouse. Now, in iVend, we have a couple of different types of warehouses that you can use. One of the warehouses would be, say, a general warehouse. This is just a general warehouse. It does things that a general warehouse would do. Right? So maybe it goes and orders around the major warehouses. I have no idea. After that, so you got your address, which you can go set. Sorry, I just need to move this. So your address, if you're going in using your address for anything, you can put that in. Yes, you can put in a GPS number if you do want to go that far. Subsidiaries, well, which subsidiary it goes to. I told you it would appear everywhere. Sales, tax code. Effectively, this is used if you are using a, if you're using it as, say, a distribution warehouse. Yeah, that's the major point why you really have a general warehouse. Most places have got, a fair number of places I know have distribution warehouses. And it makes sense for them to have it and to work with it. There you go, product tax, and there you go, warehouse type general. You'll see next up we've got a couple of other types that you use, as well as the in-transit warehouse that we get to in a minute. Finally, the ownership type, company-owned, company-operated. There's a couple of different ownership types you can have. There's company-owned, company-operated. There is company-owned, franchisee-operated. There's franchisee-owned, franchisee-operated. Depending on your model, we do to a certain extent support franchisees. Having said that, it's, well, specifically things like subsidiaries does really help with the franchisee stuff, but I've found that a lot of there's no real standard franchisee model that everyone works with. It tends to be kind of customized in every way. So while we do work with it, and there are ways to work with it, if you do franchising, you are probably going to find that there are certain ways that people want things set up and certain ways people do not want things set up. So that might also be something that you just keep an eye on. Once again, that's where we'd go and we'd say iVend extensibility to just do certain things that you might want. Enable locations, which we'll come to in a bit, and allow negative inventory. Remember I said that you can have negative inventory per warehouse if you want. In case of the general warehouse, you may actually operate in a negative inventory situation. The advantage of that is that it's actually a controlled environment. You've only got, you can actually keep an eye on things pretty well, as opposed to say a store, which you've got lots of random people walking around, and trust me, people will steal from that. With warehouse, if you've got just a warehouse by itself, you can actually lock it down very effectively. So, but once again, up to you, up to the customer. After that, we do also have things like our normal retail warehouse. Now, what we mean by a retail warehouse is effectively it's a store. This is the inventory side of the store. So this is the inventory coming in, inventory going out. This is where it's actually stored according to the system, is in the actual warehouse itself. The reason that we have a warehouse that is then attached to a store is because of the way the ERPs generally work. ERPs generally tend to work in warehouses. They do not work in stores. And this way it also allows us to have distribution warehouses as well as just normal warehouses. So over here, once again, you can see it's mainly the same sort of things, except in this case I've enabled locations. Now in locations, I've got a couple of different things I can do. Once I enable locations, I can also set default locations, so which by default what happens in what location. And the way I have to, and to be honest, the setup of the locations over here is not really what I'd normally see in real life. This is a demo stack, however. It's designed to be demoed. This is obviously not really, it's close to real life. It's not necessarily real life because there are certain features and functions we do need to show, and those are sometimes explained better by using not essentially true to life functions. And this is one of the cases. Now, the actual location, the actual settings over here for the locations, essentially what is one of the things that you can set up. If you go down here, you'll see there's actually a location screen. Typically, once you enable locations, you then need to actually create locations. And the different types of locations you can create are, well, there's a default location, which is basically means that everything that gets sold, bought, whatever happens will go through the default location. However, I can also have a default sales location. And that means that in that particular case, if I use the default locations for warehouses, any sales will go through the sales default location. Same thing for refunds. Any refunds automatically go to the refunds location. And trust me, the refunds location is something you do want, because if, let's say I've got a electronics store. Somebody brings me back their computer and says, hey, this is broken, or phone, or whatever it is. This is broken, I want a refund. When you refund that item, the broken item goes into the refund location, and that stops people going and selling that item. Because this happens, I know it happens, I've seen it happen, and I've seen the consequences of it. Is with a refund location, you get a salesperson who's maybe a bit enthusiastic. They have a person there who's ready, hot to trot. They want that item, particularly if it comes to something like cell phones or iPhones in particular. I find do this. That person wants that item now. They got money and they're willing to spend it. And if you don't have that item, then I'm going to go somewhere else. And that's the problem. That's the problem. So the salesperson wants the comm, they want the sale, they want to do it. They go and they search high and low, and the system says, hey, we have got one iPhone available. Guy says, thank God, he just reaches into there, grabs their iPhone, walks off, sells it, and then the manager comes in and says, hey, where's that iPhone that came in for repairs? So congratulations, you've just pissed off two customers. One, the guy who bought in his phone for repairs, and two, the guy who you just sold the phone to. So, yeah, please be aware of that. That's why we have the refund location, so the guy can say, oh, yes, I just want to sell this. Click. Sorry, no stock found. This item's in for repair. And they can find out if it's in for repair or not. So that is something just to be very much aware of. You can also do fulfillment locations if you're doing deliveries, goods received, stock transfer, goods issues, and goods return locations. You can have all those there. My preferred way of setting up locations is, well, it depends really what the store wants. Typically, I do see most places will have a refund location, but I will also see that they have got other locations. And please be aware, these are not the only locations you can have in a warehouse. You can have as many locations in a warehouse as you want. This is just the default locations, and you do not even have to have all of these locations filled. Okay, so you can have locations you can have these things empty if you want, or if required. Typically, you don't need to have them all separate. You can have the default location as all of these smaller ones down below. It's up to you. We'll come back to locations a bit later, and there's well, actually no, let's do them now. Seeing we are in the location for locations. With the actual locations themselves, you actually say which warehouse they're attached to, if they're default location or not, as well as what you can do in there. Now we've seen most of the ones above, but the final type of location is a frozen location. No, it does not sing songs. And it certainly is not about to let it go. But the entire idea with the frozen location is that you would use these for display items. So typically, once again, in electronic stores, well, actually, typically I see the one place that's very famous for its displays is Selfridges in London and Harrods in London. Typically they have some really, really beautiful displays. And the thing is that if it is frozen, if you would go put the stock into that display and then freeze that stock, so it cannot be sold from the display. because that's the problem with this is that is the problem with, once again, with salespeople, is that unless you specifically lock away the stock, sometimes they will just try to sell everything. All right, so that is warehouses. Oh, wait, final warehouse we need to do. Yes, there is one more. And it's actually the first warehouse you'll create, and that is the in-transit warehouse. So the entire idea with the in-transit warehouse is that your stock is going to be tracked end to end. And what you see with most ERP systems is that they do not actually have in-transit warehouse functionality. Yes, I'm aware that Sage 300 does to a certain extent. I am also aware that some of the higher end ones you can program it in, and I am aware that you can get around it using certain things. I do know these things. But by default, a lot of the ERPs do not have stock in transit locations. And that's the entire idea with this in-transit warehouse. So what will happen is, if I go back to my favorite slide, is if store 2 is sending stock to store 1, the stock will come out of store 2, go into an in-transit warehouse where it can still be effectively marked as in transit. So it's not just thrown out the door, disappears from the system, and then miraculously appears on the other side in store 2, or it's not instantly transferred across, which is also can be a problem. It actually goes out into an in-transit warehouse and then comes back into the store, then comes back into the other warehouse and is receipted in on the other side. If you'll remember, there is over and under receipting that you can do on these stock transfers, specifically because we do realize that what happens with these is obviously things get hijacked in transit. They fall off the back of the truck, sticky fingers, whatever the case might be. Yeah, people do stuff with stock. People do amazing things with stock. I really have to say, you wouldn't have thought that they even thought they could get away with it, but they do it, and then all of a sudden they think they've gotten away with it, and next thing you know, well, yeah, they're causing a hassle. But fortunately, fortunately, with this, you can avoid situations like this. And in case you're wondering how I know about these situations, is primarily because these are the horror stories I get told when implementing new sites. As well as these are also the things people figure out once they've implemented iVend and said, hey, we didn't realize this was happening over here, and we've just caught 3 people doing this. It's like, well, kind of why you put iVend in, so yeah. Glad to help. But anyway, that's what the in-transit warehouse does. I would not recommend using negative inventory for in-transit, by the way, because that is just going to go and that will cause major issues. Now, once you've set up your warehouse, you can then go along to your store, and you can actually set up the store over here. And the store, you're going to see it's got many things that it looks very familiar. For instance, store type, that's going to be retail store, subsidiary. Your selling warehouse, so you select that there. Address, and your address over here is what appears on your, come on, move. There it is, there we go. There's your address. Okay, so that will then go and be set up. So that's set up and pulled from there. Then next up, we can, then after that, so there's your selling warehouse, there's your address, email, bank account, all of that can be pulled through to your slip. So that can all go through to there. Your retail profile as well once again, it rears its ugly head to be over here. So yes, you can set your retail profile per enterprise. You can set your retail profile per store. Store mode. Next, we come up with the actual store setup over here, and this is the area that we get one of those selections that you either choose it right or you choose it wrong, and you have to go redo the database. To help you with this, we have got the store mode drop-down. Now, the store mode drop-down, let's see if I've got it over here in my help, because sometimes the help is better at explaining some of these things than I am. Okay, so the entire idea with the store mode is you've got enterprise with store. In this mode, one store is assigned to head office. So that effectively means that your store and your head office, actually, that means that your head office is at the store itself. Okay. The other mode is store, which is effectively going to mean that there is, which effectively means that you'll be set up like this. So just be aware of that. It is something that I have seen people mess up. Fortunately, you can only go wrong with it the first time around. After that, you can ignore it. And we also have it labeled nice and clear. Enterprise with store is going to be what we term mixed mode, which is what the DemoStack is set up as. Just store will mean that the enterprise is separate from the store. All right. Afterwards, that will then go manage your site ID, which we use to go connect everything together, as well as your, if you're going to enable offline store, please note your stores are by default already offline capable. That's set there. This functionality at the moment is legacy functionality that we're reviewing at the moment. If it comes back online and we work with it, then we will go and then we will inform you, and there will be training sessions, and and somebody like me or me will go and tell you otherwise. But for the moment, it is not functionality that we use. Afterwards, we have the cache customer. The cache customer over here being the default customer for the system. So because we generally deal with ERPs, and you'll see over here is the default cache customer, because we deal with ERPs, the big problem with a lot of ERPs is they generally require a customer to be loaded on the system in order to actually do a sale. So what we do is we say we have a default customer called cache. He's the guy who, he's the customer that, you know, if somebody walks in off the street, they buy a can of Coke, they walk out the door, you never see them again. That's who their sale goes against. And that just makes it easier to integrate through to the ERP. But you do need a default cache customer to be loaded in the system. Purchase and sales tax codes, these are the default ones that are here. Typically, these will be used for all items, unless on the item itself, you go and you say that we're doing a different tax code over there. Fulfillment plan, yes. So fulfillment plans and fulfillment plans for special orders and layaways. So if I'm doing fulfillment, which means that I'm selling something and it's also going to be delivered, add all products. So it will then go ask me where I'm going to deliver it from to, do I want to reserve the quantity, what are the surcharges, all the rest of it. That will be enabled in here. Layaway plan, if I'm going to use layaways. How many of you are familiar with layaways, also known as laybys? Also known as, yeah, well, typically I see it a lot. If you can just put up your hands for this. If I don't see any hands in the next couple of seconds, I'm going to go say no. Okay, all right, so layaway. I'm pretty sure you've seen, if you've had these, let me see, I'm trying to think. Yeah, typically I see this a lot with places that sell furniture. So, you know, 10% down and 12 months to pay, that kind of stuff. That's effectively a layaway. So a layaway being, yeah, I want to buy this item, but I want to pay you off for it. That's something that we can do over here. That's effectively a layaway. There we go. Is there a default salesperson? Yeah, please remember this works in conjunction with what we talked about in the salespersons for the retail store. You can get that set as well. And that also means that if you've got a mandatory salesperson, it will by default take him. So just be aware of that, as well as I'm sure that once again you descend into salespeople comm wars, and it's a pain. Anyway, reassign all tills at the end of the day, yes, no. Is there a default hardware profile? We're going to come to hardware profiles a bit later, hopefully today if we hurry up. After that, we've got sales store group for taxation and pricing, as well as your price lists. Your price list, we have a couple of things you do need to note about this. Your price list over here is the default sales price list. However, you'll also notice at the bottom over here, I have a button that says price list. And essentially what this will allow me to do is this extends the price list functionality. I can say that I want a certain price list to be used, effective from a certain date to be active then. That means that you're not waiting for all the stores to shut down and then have it update to all the stores at a certain date at a certain time. You can also go say, okay, I want this price list to be effective from this date to this date, from this date, and then I want a second price list to take over from another date. That's really up to you about how you want that, but that can be set there. Next up is the retail price list. This price list is, believe it or not actually the price list that's used for actual sales. That's the price, as I said, that's the price list just above. The retail price list is if you're going and doing a comparison price. And typically I see this happen on your, I see this happen a lot in fashion, to be honest. You'll go and you'll see you'll typically see a tag on certain things, was $9.99, now $4.99. So those are effectively two different price lists. The was $9.99 and the was $9.99 would be the retail price list that you set it there because that was the retail price. And the now $4.99 would be set over here in the price list. On-premise, okay. All right, yeah, if you're going to use cloud, you can go say if it's cloud or not. Typically, yeah, once again, like the offline store mode, it's in this case, it's always going to be on-premise, unless you are doing it in the cloud, in which case even then it's still on-premise because it's not being rolled out through our cloud or through CloudEX or one of the other providers. That's something else that we're looking at. Use store scheduler service. The reason you would tick this is if you wanted the emails to be sent from the store as opposed to the head office. Like I said, you can determine either or. It's up to you, really, which one you want. And then your API server. This is also important for the store, particularly if you're using mobile point of sale, because then they need to go and link into the API server in order to work. Finally, you do need to set up a custom series for each store, because each store, I believe I went through the custom series and how they work yesterday, or maybe the day before, but one of the two. And then finally, if you go and you set up your registered management console. So this is where you assign a specific license to a management console for a store. We are going to go through the management. Oh, actually, we can do that now. When you go and the important thing to realize when you go and install iVend, okay. And typically, what I recommend for everybody is when you install iVend, install both the point of sale and the management console everywhere, right? Really, just leave them both ticked, install it everywhere. It's easier. They both have the same machine specs, so it doesn't actually really matter if you, unless you're really hard up for space, and even then I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference. Management console only takes about 200 megs of space, so it's not going to really, trust me, it's not going to make that much of a difference. The reason I say that is that if I've got to fix something at iVend POS 1, it's much easier if I have the management console on iVend POS 1 than opposed to having just the point of sale on iVend POS 1, and then I need to do like a team viewer remote desktop to the manager station to try and go fix it there, and then it's then the network goes down and I'm slowing the network and it's causing the other things to crash, or it's causing other things, other problems. Rather just install both the POS and the management console on the iVend POS, on your point of sales, and heck with it, even install the point of sale on the store manager station, because there are times you are going to need to use that there. I do it. It's easier. Trust me. Listen to Uncle Keith. Okay, and the reason that I say install it everywhere is because you can control which management consoles are used at which point in the system. And you do that by going and creating an instance of the management console over here. Then, once you've created the instance, you can then assign it to the store. That means that effectively you might have management console installed in a place, but if it doesn't installed at a store, on the POS, for instance, but if it doesn't have an instance that's registered to it, and that's registered to it, it will not actually, you won't actually be able to open it. You won't be able to work anything in it. Makes it far easier to go and avoid people to go and makes it far easier to stop people from going and doing things. So with the management console, you would go and you need to create an instance of it for everyone that's going to be used. So typically each store would have at least one instance of management console, as well as your enterprise server would have at least one instance of management console and probably many more. There you can, and the nice thing with the management console is you can assign the license for it to either a user or a device. So with that, once again, you can go and control exactly who uses what, where, when, how, and why. Once you create the instance, it'll go and say what's the site ID, so which store is it at, which machine is it being used on, and what's the hardware ID. The hardware ID linking it specifically to one machine, as opposed to going and having it linked to different machines. That way, once again, you can control who uses what, where, when, how, and why. Okay. All right, fiscal masks. If you're using fiscalized printing, you'll know about it you'll know about it. Trust me, it's one of the big questions store owners ask when they are going and setting things up. When they're looking for POS systems, do you do fiscalized? Are you fiscalized for local printer? Registered handheld devices. This is for our handheld scanner, which is available on Android and Windows Mobile 6.5. It's not available on Apple primarily because Apple doesn't really do mobile scanning. It doesn't really do handheld scanners. Well, you can get things that will attach an Apple phone to that, but you still need to buy an Apple phone, and yeah, that's expensive. After that, initialize eStore. Don't worry about that. Like I said, our eStore is being end of life. It's still available if you want it, but typically you don't need to worry about it now. And we've already discussed the priceless functionality. Now, just coming back to the store grouping over here, the store group. The store grouping over here allows you to create multiple groups for your individual stores. And these can be based on a couple of different criteria. The important thing about the criteria being you can go say, well, for instance, for pricing, and that store group might be, say, your high, medium, and low value stores. I do know that retail companies do divide their stores up that way. For instance, Spa uses it's Quick Spa, Spa, and Super Spa. Are there three different brands of Spa, as it were? There's also, I think there's Quick Save and Save More, and there's a batch of other ones that they use, but they all use the same central organization. There's a batch of criteria that they use to divide things up and just make sure that they are selling at the right price, at the right place, at the right in the right location. Because otherwise, if you're trying to go and sell at like your ultra premium level in the middle of a low income district, your store is going to close down. Whereas if you're selling at a very low level in an ultra premium district, everyone's going to think that you're too cheap and no one will buy from you. Yes, it's a weird thing that happens, but it does. So over here, you can do that for pricing. You can also do that for taxation, because I do know there are special taxation economic incentive areas that do happen around the world. Once again, I think Richards Bay Industrial Development Zone is one of the areas where apparently the tax is like ultra low. So you can do that for special taxation for there. Then finally, you can also do for inventory. Now, inventory is actually quite an interesting one because it means that you can geographically define your stores. So, for instance, if I've got all my stores in, say, the Western Cape, okay, the Western Cape out here, the Western Cape, I can say they can see the inventory that's in their stores. And this is quite the same thing for all the stores in Gauteng, right? And this is actually quite important because with the best will in the world, and I know I know cashiers there are some lovely ones of them out there, but sometimes their sense of direction is not great. And to give you an example, there are suburbs that have got the same name. And there can be suburbs in multiple places. There can be suburbs and even cities with the same name. To give you an example, I'm sure everyone's seen The Simpsons. The Simpsons live in Springfield, USA. To give you an idea, I think there's 11 different towns called Springfield in America. Yeah. There's, for instance, Springfield, Massachusetts. There's Springfield, Oregon. I think there's even a Springfield, Missouri, if I remember correctly. So there's lots of them. And that means that, yeah, if you're not in the right place at the right, if you're going and saying, yeah, sure, you can, yeah, it's available in Springfield. Which one? Because one is like 5,000 Ks away from the other. So that's why with your inventory grouping, you can go say, okay, all my stores in the Western Cape, you can only see the stock in those stores. And that just makes it easier to go and actually say, okay, you can only see this area. You can't see outside the area. You don't need to. Don't worry about it. All right. So there we go. Stores. We've done departments. Point of sales. Okay, your point of sales over here. Now that as you can see, we're working down through how to go set this up, and trust me, we will be. I'm hoping we'll be a bit farther along, but we'll carry on. We'll soldier on, and we will make sure we get everything finished. The point of sales. Once again, you set these up to be either PC or mobile based. Which store they're attached to. No, you cannot have a point of sale that goes and leaves from one store and it goes to another store. Point of sales typically are heavy devices that do not move, that do not float around the place. If you're looking for a mobile point of sale, that's what a mobile point of sale does. But even so, that would still be limited to within a specific store. You do not want point of sales selling from selling at one place and then moving spontaneously to another store. And over here, you can go see the default sales location, default refund location, default fulfillment location. Very important, because that means that if I do a refund from this one, it goes automatically to that specific refund location. It does also mean that if I host a pop-up store, which is kind of more important with a mobile point of sale, but with a pop-up store, you can say you sell from the pop-up location, right, as opposed to just selling general stock from the store. Site ID, that's automatically assigned when you go and you select your store type. Offline enabled, once again, don't use that for the moment. We're reviewing that functionality. Your retail profile, strikes again. Dun, dun, dun. Hardware profile, which we will come to in a minute, as well as your hardware ID. Your hardware ID over here is the way that we assign a license. Once a hardware ID has been connected to this, it automatically picks up and says, aha, well, that license has been assigned to that bit of hardware. Done. If, however, that bit of hardware explodes, you can then hit the little X button here, and it will then allow you to reassign the hardware ID the next time you load onto the new device. So you load up onto the device, and it will go say, hey, there's an available point of sale that you can assign. There's available point of sale setup, that can be assigned to this device. Do you want to do it? Yes or no? Yes. Continue forward. Print profile. Yeah, do you want to do a default print profile? What department, if there is one? Is it enabled or not? Is there a payment processor unique identifier? Typically, we went through payment processors yesterday as the last one. The payment processors typically want to know which specific point of sale is conducting which specific transaction. That's why we have that field there. Afterwards, we have the show customer display. Do you want to do that or not? And then finally, what is the customer display you want to show? So you can set that there. Mobile point of sale is very similar, except there are one or two small other things that are slightly different. Over here, you'll go and you'll see that it uses slightly different hardware ID because it's obviously connected to an Android or Apple device. As well, with that, you can also go and you'll also see that it has things like API token and where it's pulling the data for it from. The other nice thing is you can set up a lot of the settings in the background over here. You then go to scan configuration, and it will give you a QR code with all that data embedded in it. The the mobile POS scans the QR code, picks it up, puts it in, and it automatically loads most of that data that you never knew that you wanted. So, and trust me, typing in things like IP addresses on a tablet is a pain. This is the scan configuration is a godsend. Right, so those are POSs. We've covered management consoles, reason codes. Now, you can set up as many reason codes as you want in the system, as well as you can also go and set up what type of action it's associated with. If I go here to new, you'll see that there are there are lots of actions, everything from cash in and out all the way down to editing time clock and goods, doing expenses, goods receipts issues. There's a lot of them that you can set here. Remember that you can enforce them through the management console. That's something else you can set there. Next up, we hit sales attributes, which I did discuss yesterday. This is where you can go and add in, I did actually say I would get back to it though. So this is where you can effectively add in additional fields that need to be filled out for the sale. Typically though, you can also say whether they are integrated. And yes, they do integrate back in most of the integrations that we work with. They will actually go back to the original system and write this in as well, which is kind of nice. You can go say now the sales attribute and the sales transaction, the transaction item attribute, are pretty much they're pretty much the same thing. The only difference is that the sales attribute happens at the header level. The transaction item attribute happens at the item level. So slightly different things, but they work in fairly similar ways. Now the sales attribute over here, you can go set this, where it appears in sequence. Is it a required field or not? So is it mandatory? When do you capture it, at beginning or end of sale? What's your validation type? Does it go against a table? Is it valid values? Is it against a customer, or is it a product? No, a product it will validate against. Is there a default value? Is there a regex pattern? Yes, you can read up online about regex patterns and how they work. Is there a specific table name it uses in the background? So if you have your validation type as table, you will need to enter a table name. Yes, you can create a UDT in iVend. Okay. Is it integrated or not? Considering my system isn't integrated at all, that's why these are kind of grayed out. So is it integrated, and what's the integrated field name? Is it active and is it visible, and which transactions is it applicable on? Finally, if you do select valid values, you can start adding your valid values over there. Ta-da! And the transaction item attribute works in much the same way, right? So once again, I'm not really going to spend a lot of time on it because we got to go, 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 go. Next up is your poll displays. Yeah. So what does the poll display when it's actually in use? So what's your first line message? Does it blink? How is it aligned? What's your columns? All that stuff can be set here. Then next up is hardware registration, hardware profile. Now, hardware registration and hardware profile are two parts of really where we go and we set up how things link through to the system. There is on our website, on our site, there is actually a video on this, and it is quite an involved setup. I'm going to do a very quick setup, a quick explanation of it over here because, yeah, I do need to explain a little bit. Once again, I do encourage you to go online and review the website and find out what's going on there. Because it works, the hardware registration works in conjunction with the hardware profile. The entire idea being is that if you're using, for instance, OPOS drivers to go and run things, and that's the webinar you need to look at, the OPOS webinar, you can then go and run things in here. You can then go set things up in such a way that quite literally if a point of sale falls over and you've got your OPOS drivers set up, you can just go and install iVend, and iVend will automatically know how everything works on the machine. And you'll go effectively over here, you're saying which receipt printer it uses, which document printer, which poll display, mag stripe reader, scales, MICRs, well, magnetic card readers, signature captures, showing a customer-facing display. All of these things you can set here. And you can also go and set which ones they use, how they use it, and you can do that over here. So I'm going to dive down into the simulated receipt display, go to edit mode. When you set this up, it will ask you what hardware type you're using. You can go set all the ones that I've pretty much said earlier, and then you can go say, you'll see it's got an option for is it OPOS or is it simulated. At the moment, you'll see my one is receipt printer.simulated, which means it brings up this handy-dandy little receipt printer over here. Ta-da! Whereas if I go and I say .opos, it's then looking for the OPOS connection. And with that, I can then go to config, and it's going to ask me for a device name. And at that point, I'm going to go tell you, go and have a look for the webinar. Okay, because that will explain more about OPOS and how that works together with that. Once again, guys, these lectures are meant to be in conjunction with the viewing online. I do understand that that there is some issues with the website. Because of that, I am currently reevaluating whether we are going to go and write Friday or not. Primarily because the big problem with it is that I don't want to just stick you guys and say, oh yes, we're going to look at the video, wander off and then come back. Now it's time for this. And you say, well, we can't look at the videos. They're all not available. So I don't want to do that because that's obviously cruel and unusual. So let's rather, if the website is up, and I'll have a look later today, I'll make a decision later today on exactly what's going on there, but we'll see what happens with the website and whether it's available. So let's continue on over here. So that's the hardware registration. Once you've done that, you can then set your hardware in. Do have a question. Philip asks, can we just receive a pass for all of us by Friday if it is still not up? Philip, the short answer is no. The long answer is no. As much as I would love to, if you do want, okay, I will put this out there. I will put this out there to you guys. If you do want, we can try and arrange another session next week for you guys. If it's not available, for you guys to write. And for me to go and actually mark them at the same time, because that might be something to just look at. But let's just see what happens. Yeah, we'll see where we go with it. Really, it's something that we will discuss. Well, it's something that I'll have an answer for you tomorrow morning. Okay, so that's the hardware profile search and hardware profile setup. We've covered payment processor yesterday. Print profile. Yay. Here's the default print profile. The entire idea with the default print profile over here is that you are essentially going and setting up what prints at what device. Now your print profile for the eagle-eyed of you, that one, pause. The print profile for the eagle-eyed of you would have gone and seen over here, set there, print profile. Okay, and this is where you set what actually prints. Does it print, say, does it use a printer selection to go print? Does it use an XML report? If it's using an XML report, it's typically printing to one of the thermal printers. And you do have the option over here to print to either an XML or an A4. The difference being that an A4 report is would be a Windows print, whereas an XML report is a thermal print. So that's where your OPOS and Windows devices come through. There's your day labor chit, what sort of data is being used. You can't edit it over here, but I'll show you where you edit it in a minute. But you can go select what sort of receipts are being used for those specific formats. If there's a specific report ID, so the report ID being for the A4 report, so over here you'll see I've got a Z-tape and a Z-tape over there. Next up is copies to, this one over here is copies to print, and the last one is copies to reprint. Guys, seeing you guys are here, I will just show you, Control F1, one of the answers to a question you will get. And it's very simple. Copies to, this is why I keep on telling people what is the help. Because quite literally, when you're writing the exam, if you come, you should have iVend installed. You need to have iVend open, because if you come along here and you go to the help will actually say things like 4 copies to print. One of the answers to one of the questions. I'm not going to tell you the question. I will tell you the answer. I won't tell you the question. But one of the answers to one of the questions is valid values from 1 to 99. So you can guess the question from them. But that is one of the answers. So, and it, once again, quite literally, we know that when you write the exam is an open book exam. The exam is, when I go and I run this as a classroom format, I go and I actually encourage everybody to please talk to each other. Because I know we're all used to exams. No, you can't talk to each other. No, you can't go do this. That's not real life, guys. Real life is if you don't understand something, hey, you can pick up the phone, call Philip and go say, Philip, what was that thing that Keith said about blah? And at which point he might go, oh yeah, I think I don't remember about that. Oh, it's this, and this. But you talk amongst, the entire point of that is that you talk amongst yourselves. And I prefer that you do that. Remember, we know that it's an open book exam, and yes, I know that you guys should talk, that you guys do talk amongst yourselves. I'd much rather you guys just get on with it in the open and actually just do the exam, because that means that you will actually understand you'll understand the system better, and you'll be able to work together better with it. So, yeah, that's my view of it. Next up is events. Now, events over here is, events are basically things like, well, 4th of July would be an event, I can guarantee you that much, at least in America. It would be things like May Day. It would be things like your, hey, we've just turned 20, or we've just turned 10, or whatever it is, or first year, and this is our anniversary. And and with that, you can go set this up. You can go and then do reports, and you can say which stores it's applicable to, and you can do and you can then pull reports to go see, okay, from this period to this period, at this time and this time, we had this event. What happened? Was it a good event? Was it a bad event? Did things? Where did it go? You can essentially use it for reporting. I'm not going to go through discount resolution setup or your item matrix settings because, well, we can have a quick look at them really. The discount resolution setup, this changes how the system goes and does its discounts. I really, really, really wouldn't mess with this. Leave it the way it's set up now. If you've got a problem, rather contact us and we'll try and walk you through what changes you need to do. Well, contact me or your local LPE and they will help you with this. Of course, your local LPE might just go call me or one of the other guys to go and help you with that, but one way or another, we'll make a plan to get there. Same thing for your item matrix global setting. You saw earlier when I brought up that item, the Apex Bionic jacket. You saw when I brought it up earlier, when it came up in these different, just move that off to the side, it came up in all these different sizes and colors. With your item matrix, you've got what we term a style or a parent item over here, and that's the Apex Bionic jacket. Typically, you will never have stock of that because it's really impossible to have stock of a style, but you will have stock of your individual child items beneath it, being these ones. The item matrix setup over here determines what is inherited from your main style to your child items. It also determines what, for instance, is your item code separator. Do you use a space as the item description separator? How exactly do they fit together? What codes? Which ones go first, second, or third? And also what gets copied from, so if I update the parent item, what updates the child items? If I create the parent item, what gets created to the child items? That you can also follow through here. Once again, see videos online for more details. Locations we've covered, display profiles. Okay, now your display profiles over here are something that I have touched on. I did this earlier without actually showing you where it was, and to give you an idea what a display profile does, over here in the management console, I'm logged in as a specific user, as a super user, effectively. And if I open up this product and I go to view inventory, you'll see that I can see all the columns over here. Whereas if I go to over here and I go to view inventory, you will see, okay, in this case it shows all those. Let me go to here, there. If you look up, and, oh, I think I'm logged in as the wrong person here. Okay, but what it's meant to do is it's meant to go and only show you, it's not meant to go show you all the columns. What actually should happen is I should see less of the columns, and I can do that by going right-clicking on here, Layout, Customize, and I can quite literally go and pull the columns off here. I then go right-click, Layout, Save, Cashier, and then you'll go see it. Then you'll see it change to actually be there. I could also load the cashier view. There's what the cashier should see. Okay, so you can see there's definitely a difference between the two. That means that I can effectively limit people on what they see and how they see it. And that, but obviously once I've gone and I've made those changes, I might need to go and fix them if I've done something wrong. So that's why you create a default display profile here. We can open up the cashier one and you can see that some of these have changed. I can't go in and say, change this one specific field setting on there. I effectively need to go delete the one view and then redo it. But still, the nice thing is you can do this for a security role, which we are hopefully coming to next fairly shortly. Okay. Next up, display profile, your receipt print formats. Yeah, once again, guys, view the video online for this. There is actually quite a bit about it, but you can actually design your own receipt print formats. I clicked designer a little too soon there. Okay. If you do know XML, you can quite literally design your own receipt print format in here. If you want to really get down that far, quite literally you can type in here and you can you can type in here and you can do that. Otherwise, you can just come along to your designer over here, and like I said before, please see the videos. They will go and guide you on exactly how to go and design most of this. There's a lot you can actually do in here. That includes if and else statements, if, else, else if, end if, paper cuts, blank lines, separators, the whole thing. It's all available in here. You'll see I've actually got it split into different areas of the actual receipt. And you can also add new sections. You can import and export these if you want. That's all available to you. And if you completely go and blow it, there is copies of the design available in your C drive under your management console folder. Okay. Right, and then document print profile, which also allows you to go and say what documents print out for what users at what point. So for instance, if I'm doing a purchase order, does it apply to specific users or specific roles? If I do a purchase order, then it prints out to a certain place. If I do a goods return, it prints out to a certain place. Anything like that. If I do, there you go, transaction detail, whatever it might be, it'll print out to different places. So yeah, I can do that. Then, okay, now we're getting across to, yeah, I think we'll finish up on, well, hopefully we'll get to the end of authorization. That will be it, because then we're going to need to scream through the rest of it tomorrow. Employees. Ta-da. Okay, now my employees over here, I've got for these employees, obviously I would have a different one of these set up for every employee I have. Now, for each of these, the entire idea with this is that you are going to have many employees come and go. You really are, as a retailer. Particularly people like cashiers, they come and go like no tomorrow. Quite literally, I certainly know out here in South Africa, You can have people who work for you for 20 years, and just one day they stop coming. Nobody knows why. Right there, or maybe if you're lucky, they'll come back and say, "Oh no, they were doing stuff, and can they please have their job back?" Otherwise, if they're unlucky, then you might get somebody coming along claiming death benefits. Yeah. Okay, so there's your code: first name, last name, middle name, job title. Yeah, applicable subsidiary. We talked about those. Address, email, mobile phone, department. Something I do want to point out, we do not do payroll. Payroll is its own little kettle of worms, and we don't really want to get involved with it. There's a lot of payroll legislation worldwide, and it's very different from country to country. So we'd rather not do that. We'd rather leave that to the payroll experts. If you want to go and write an integration that integrates us through to a payroll solution, we're more than happy. But for the moment, we don't do payroll. Then next up is you can go set your departments. You can do teams. Team being what I referred to earlier as in your jewelry store, electronics store type of setup, where you have a team of people on the floor. They go and use one point of sale. All their sales are still recorded individually against their users. It's just that they are all together as a team using one point of sale, as opposed to one cashier is assigned to one specific point of sale. Is the guy set to a specific store? Yes, you can do that. What's his position? Yep, you can set that too. Retail profile. Yes, you can even set a retail profile down to this specific employee. If this checkbox is not ticked, transaction entry, it will not allow you to do any transactions. It won't even allow you to really log into the system. You need to check that. Same thing for active. If it's not active, you're not allowed to go into the system. Team banking, does it use team banking or not? And this needs to be checked along with the team. And then uses time clock. Yes. Remember, our time clocking features are rather limited. I'd rather don't use. Well, you can use that. It's only really effective for cashiers. Are they a manager or not? Are they a salesperson or not? What is their preferred language? And yes, you can set your language on a per employee basis. It means that if I log in, I will get English, whereas if somebody else logs in, they might get something else. So French or Italian or Swahili or Zulu. One of those. Allow end of day. So can you do your end of day from your POS? You can only check this if it's a one store, one POS setup. That's that. Can you unlock the POS, and can you approve your transactions or not? Over here, you can say what your different job codes are. You do need to have at least one job code in the system. And the entire reason earlier I said that employees come and go is because I'm pretty much expecting there to be lots and lots of these in the system. But these are not the actual people who log in. If you've seen me log in, I don't actually log in with that USR 001 code. I log in with the code 1 or 2. And where we do that is we actually set that in the authorization setup, which I will come to in a minute as soon as we've just quickly done these three. Employee position, yes, it's there. You need to fill out at least one. Team, yeah, it's there. You just need to fill out a team if you're using team banking. Job code, yeah, you do need to have at least one of these, and it needs to be active. Then we get down to authorization. Now, on the authorization level, I'm going to come to security user first, because what effectively happens is an employee is attached to a security user. The security user is then the actual login account, as it were. So the entire idea with this is I go along, I log in as user 2. Indeed, I can do that over here. Yeah, go away. Void the current transaction. It will not allow me to log out if there's a transaction in process. I will then log out. And then log in as user 2. Log in. By the way, if you're using biometrics, this is where the biometrics activates, and you can log in using that. If you're using the swipe card, you can use that here as well. Okay, that's now logged me in as user 2. There you go, user 2. Here's where I set my password, my electronic ID. If I'm going and using a magnetic swipe card, that goes there. Security role. And who is the employee? That goes with there. Please be aware, I have actually changed the name of this field to employee. Otherwise, it's also known as user. Must use magnetic card, so to swipe to log in. Are they active? Can you change your password or not? Has the account been locked? Because obviously if you've got a particularly bad user, you just want to go lock them and lock them out of the account permanently. Next up, we have an option over here to do what's called a training user. Now, the idea with this is that you create a training is that somebody new joins and you want to train them on the system. So you set up their security user, you set up the employee, you attach it to the security user. The security user then goes and is set to a training user state. In the training user state, it actually creates a new training user database that the person will then log into. They will then do their training, and they can then train and use the system, get familiar with it, and then they can go, when they're ready, you can switch it back to a production user. They then log in again, and they log into production user, and they carry on, and they do their training. Now, that is going to be something that you would need to do quite a bit, and that's the entire idea. That's one of the things around the entire idea of the system, is that once you've set up your security users, you shouldn't really have to set up too many more per store. Typically, the size of the people at the number of people at a store don't really fluctuate too much. There might be one or two additions, if there are more people in, less people, but once you've set up your basic users about who's there, you're not really going to have to add in too many more as time goes by. But what is going to happen is employees are going to go and arrive, and employees are going to go and leave. That's why you have to set up an employee over here in human resources, and then when you come through here to security user, you need to put an employee in for the security user. And the entire idea is that if a specific employee leaves, instead of having to go reset up everything for the new employee, including all of this and what they can do, where they can see, how they can see things in the system, instead the only thing you do is you change the employee that's listed here for the security user, and then that to the new employee, and that new employee can carry on and work in the system. They are not essentially you don't have to spend hours then resetting up everything in the system, as it were. Next up, are they an enterprise user? If they are, they can log in at enterprise. If they're not, then they can't. Which store are they associated? And if I am an enterprise user, then typically it won't allow me to associate with the store. So that's something you can set there. Are they a management console user? Yes or no. So can they use management console or not? Do they use dashboard web viewer? And are they API authentication user? Can they use that? The cloud user stuff, I wouldn't worry about at the moment to log with the SAM name. And finally, has license. This over here does not actually need to be checked, so long as the management console has a license. If the management console doesn't have a license, then this needs to be checked, and then the person can log in on that management console. This is only to do with the management console. It's not to do with the point of sale. Finally, if I've got my fingerprint scanner, fingerprint enabled, I can go fingerprint reader, and it will go pick that up, and I can then do my fingerprints for here, get my fingerprints enrolled for here. Right. After the security user, I then get assigned to a security role. And the entire idea with this is that you're going to have many cashiers. Or for instance, you're going to have a fair number of store managers or stock people or whatever the case is. And instead of us having to go and set up every single username for that, every single username and what they can and can't see in the system, instead, once you've in the security user, you get assigned to a security role. In this case, this person's assigned to the cashier role. And if I open up the cashier role, you'll see that first off I get assigned a display profile, so what I can and can't see as a cashier. And then I can also go and assign the security rights, so what can you and can't you see in the system. There are certain things that just as a basic thing do need to be turned on. For instance, you do need, if the person does use POS, they do need full access to the POS. The great advantage to this is that if you want to give your cashiers access to something in the system they didn't have before, you just need to go set that up once. You just need to go say, okay, you guys now have access to this report. Click OK, done. You don't have to go, oh, now Jesse uses it, oh, now Daniel, oh, no, what about this guy? Well, I'm not sure. Well, hang on, no, we'll come back. No, once, done. That's it. And there we go. And that just makes it far, far easier. And can you assign roles at the store or not? Password policy. I know we are almost at the time. I'm just going to finish this section and then we'll be done for today. Password policy, max invalid login attempts allowed, 6. Afterwards, you need to get the super user to sort you out. Password age and account duration lockouts. You can set those. By the way, I do want to point out you can't go and change your minimum password length or password history. And your passwords also do require a special character, a capital, and numbers. So special character being something like the @ symbol or an exclamation mark or any of those funky other characters that they have up there. All right. Lastly for today, which we'll see if we can cover this in 3 minutes, we're just going to cover the authorization template and authorization stage. Now these only appear if you checked, where is it over here, use advanced authorization up here in the enterprise settings. Otherwise this is not available. But over here you can go say, effectively you can go say who does what and what happens. So over here on the originators side, I've got 2 originators, and what it means by this is who triggers this authorization, who triggers something that needs authorization. So you can see number 2 is my cashier, and if I go across over here to where I triggered it earlier, cash in, it will trigger my authorization. With that, it then says who triggers it and then what happens. Now I can have multiple originators and I can have multiple authorization stages here. Quite literally, I can have, okay, it's this stage, then this stage, then this stage, then this stage. Those are all things I can set in the system pretty easily. And if I go to the stages, you'll see the authorization stage itself, right? Essentially, it's got who needs to approve and what are the number of approvals that are required. So in this case, I've got 2 approvers, but only 1 approval is required. I could have 3 or 4 approvers and 2 approvals are required. That's something else I can set up in the system. Right. From there, I then say what is the setup that needs to trigger stuff. So for instance, over here, credit limit override, reprint transaction receipt, change salesperson, any of these things. And these will look very familiar to you if you had your eyes open and were looking at our retail config, retail profile, because these are the same things that are in the retail profile. Now, just to be clear, you can turn these things on in the retail profile and you can turn these things on over here as well. They can both be on at the same time. But what it will mean is that if you go and you hit something that's an authorization, and it will first look for these authorizations, these advanced authorizations that are here. It will then, if it doesn't find that, it will then look for the one in the retail profile. The advanced authorizations, if there is an advanced authorization in place and you do the authorization, it will then allow it through. So it effectively doubles up and works with the retail profile one as well. It authorizes on the retail profile side. So that is something else just to be very much aware of for this and how it goes and fits together. All right. So unless I have got any questions, that actually brings us right up to time. So guys, do you have any questions? Unless there's any questions, I'm going to go end it here today. Tomorrow, we are going to cover IT administration, right, and POS customization. Well, IT administration, POS customization, and then operations. Fortunately, operations is not actually that difficult. We are probably going to cover most of it pretty quickly. Primarily, the things that will take a bit of time is probably going to be loyalty, and also some of the things within inventory and your business partners and till management. But that should be fine. We can cover that in the time allocated, and hopefully we can even get to some reports, but the reporting is not too much of an issue. So we should cover everything. We should be ready for what happens. I'm going to see what's happening with the website, and we'll see if there is I will have an answer for you tomorrow about what exactly is going on with testing or not. Okay. Any questions? No questions. All right. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you for listening to me prattle on again. I look forward to going and chatting to you again tomorrow. And right, we will go find out exactly what's going on. Same bat time, same bat channel. All right. Cheerio. Bye.